I hope everyone can hear me clearly. As my colleague Ntokozo said, today we are having, yes, as my colleague Ntokozo said, today we are having the Cameroon event, and we are discussing on the Anglophone crisis in Cameroon, and also looking at advocacy strategies and also the way forward. So this is going to be an engaging event. Just a bit of housekeeping. We're going to be having questions in the chat box, which we'll address later on for the participants, because they are going to have topics of discussions that they are going to be doing. On board today, we have, of course, Barrister Felix Agwonkongo of the Center for Human Rights, who is already connected now. We also have, of course, Baye Frida Ebai of BAWAC, who is also online right now. We also have Gabi Ambo of Finders Group Initiative. And then, of course, finally, we have Achaleke Christian Leke of Local Youth Corner in Cameroon. So they are going to be discussing on these various issues. We'll start off by some brief introductions. I am going to be sending the presenter profile in the chat, so you'll see the work that the various presenters have done in their line of work in the civil society. So I'm going to be sending that in the chat box just now. So we are going to start off the introductions, and so we'll start with Barrister Felix Agwonkongo. So introduce yourself and the organization and a bit of the work you do. Thank you very much. Hello, Barrister Felix, are you there? I think he's having a bit of trouble with his connection. In the meantime, please, Frida Ebai, can you please introduce yourself?
Good morning, Smith. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, colleagues. I am Baye Frida Ebai, Women, Peace and Security Advocate, and the Executive Director for BAWAC Cameroon. BAWAC Cameroon is a woman-led organization focusing on conflict prevention in communities, GBV prevention, and communicating effectively and building resilience in conflict-affected communities in the Southwest and Northwest regions in Cameroon for the past 5 years.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Gabi Ambo, please introduce yourself. Gabi, I think your mic is off, please.
You're right. Thank you, Smith. Thank you, fellow members on board. I am Gabi Ambo, founder and executive director of Finders Group Initiative. I'm a human rights advocate as consultant of the U.S. Institute for Diplomacy and Human Rights in Washington. I actually have been able to do quite a lot of work on ground with great competencies in human rights advocacy, promotion, protection, defense, and redress using the mechanisms of the United Nations and African Union for quite a while now, getting to close to 24 years that we definitely have been on ground in doing all of this work to meet up with a new situation on ground, which with humanitarian concerns that we actually have been contributing on a quarter to ensuring that we roll off all the ongoing conflict and contribute our quarter to restore normalcy in the circumstance. So we actually have addressed a lot of concerns of human rights and a lot more others. Actually, we're here to discuss the issues we have before us with respect to rolling out the conflict on ground. So we'll be talking more. Thank you so very much for this opportunity.
Yes, thank you very much. I see that Barrister Felix is still trying to connect with his audio.
Sorry, Smith, please bear with us.
Yes,
We currently have load shedding in the class and therefore the system is off.
Oh, yes. Sorry, I have a bit of load shedding out here. But in the meantime, I'm just sharing the profile of the participants, of the presenters in the chat box. So you get a feel of our speakers today. Also, we just want to welcome everyone else that has just joined us on this event. Barrister Felix, can you hear us now?
Yeah, good morning. I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're just doing a round of introductions. Can you please introduce yourself and your organization?
I'm Barrister Felix Abobala. I am the president of the Center for Human Rights and Democracy in Africa, a civil society organization working on the protection and promotion of human rights. We've done extensive work with regards to protection of human rights, especially in the restive regions of the Southwest and the Northwest, where we've been conducting numerous advocacy campaigns to raise awareness on human rights violations, the protection of human rights defenders and journalists, training civil society organizations on monitoring, documentation, and human rights reporting, and working with other like-minded civil society actors to raise the profile of the gross, systematic, egregious, and widespread human rights violation in Cameroon in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barrister Felix. So while we will wait for the next presenter to join in, Achaleke, I think, is having a bit of issues with his network. But in the meantime, just to remind everyone again that this is an initiative by the HRDA, the Students of the Human Rights and Democratization Program for the Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria. And as we indicated earlier, the center runs as an academic center and is as well a non-governmental organization. And of course, with that arm, it does this sort of advocacy programs that the students are running right now. I don't know if we should wait for Achaleke, but otherwise, I think we can start with, maybe we can start with Barrister Felix to give us an idea, an overview of the conflict right now. I mean, maybe some people do not know the background. I see a lot of people here from Nigeria and some persons from Kenya as well. Maybe a lot of persons might not know maybe the background of the conflict. Of course, Barrister Felix, you have been at the helm of the whole situation from the beginning. Can you please give us a feel of, a bit of the history and the background and where we are, you think we are at the present moment? Thank you.
Well, the whole conflict in Anglophone Cameroon, Southern Cameroon, West Cameroon, and Bazunia, depending on where you stand, has its origins also from history, from the colonial period, the partition of the country, the Versailles Peace Treaty. Look at the Berlin Conference, partition of the country between part with Nigeria, part with French Cameroon, and then the plebiscite, the referendum, and then we got to a situation where the Anglophones feel that they are discriminated upon, they are marginalized, that there is a Francophonization of the Anglophones. I'm just trying to fast forward things so that we get into context. In the 90s, they had the All Anglophone Conference that took place in Boya, where they talked about a return to a two-state federation, which a memo was sent to government, suggestions for during the constitutional conference called the tripartite, which wasn't respected. So tension has always been amongst the various communities. And in 2014, 2015, lawyers and teachers started regrouping together to clamor for the respect of the common law, which is practiced in the Southwest and the Northwest region, unlike the civil law in the other 8 regions. And equally also, they complain about the encroachment of the Anglophone, Anglo-Saxon subsystem of education, which is practiced in the Southwest and the Northwest region. This led to the creation of the Cameroon Anglophone Civil Society Consortium. That was the umbrella organization that brought lawyers and teachers together for them to easily articulate their position. Civil society also joined, and this movement, which was accepted across the board, became the voice, the spokesperson of the Anglophones in Cameroon during the period. Led to a series of strike actions, which the people followed school boycotts, which was supposed to be temporary to draw the attention of government, national and international community of the seriousness of what we were facing as a people. And don't forget that if you look at the 2009 recommendation of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights of Ngumes Capo versus the state of Cameroon, where the commission clearly said the Anglophones are a people in Cameroon and have certain basic rights which must be respected. Unfortunately, the government has consistently failed in respecting such rights. That morphed into the 2016 series of peaceful strike actions, leading on the 17th of January 2017, the arrest of the leaders of the Cameroon Anglophone Civil Society Consortium. Some others went on exile. They were charged with terrorism, secession, incitement of civil war, group rebellion, amongst others. During that period where there was a void, other groupings came up, which consortium, and they started clamoring for separation, for creation of a state they call the Ambazonia, which was a name that from Goji Dinka, one of the leaders of the Anglophone movement, and who was the first bar president of the Cameroon Bar Association, had morphed it and had created this Ambazonia movement. So it was rekindled by the younger generation of activists and advocates who were clamoring for a separate state. But it wasn't violent until around late 2018, early 2019, when it moved to a full-blown armed conflict, and which has led to enormous destruction of the economy of the Southwest and Northwest. Kids cannot freely go to school. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people crossed the border, went to Nigeria, some are in Ghana. Internally displaced persons, the people moved from the Southwest and the Northwest regions. They find themselves in the littoral, in the Western regions, in the center and the South, and also in the Southwest and the Northwest, there was internal displacement. People moved from some of the interlands to come to safe areas, Limbe, Boya, Boya, for example, in the Northwest, they moved to Bamenda. So over time, there's been fighting, attempts at as having some talks have actually failed. There was a grand dialogue that took place, which wasn't really a dialogue per se, because one party determined the venue, the conveners, the agenda, and everything. And some of the Ambazonians, the separatists, felt that it wasn't representative enough, it wasn't independent enough. They needed third party to make sure that the decisions or whatever agreements there would be respected. Of recent, the Swiss also tried, which failed. There was also a peace process in Canada that has not succeeded. So for now, we're in a stalemate where nobody's actually winning. But what I notice is that the way the Anglophones used to support the separatist movement, they don't longer support it any longer. They are losing legitimacy in the eyes of the people because of the crimes, heinous crimes. I would tell you, heinous crimes committed by the non-state armed group, from kidnapping, beheading, chopping of arms and leaves, terrorizing the civilian population in particular as their stock in trade, which is something that the people are not finding funny, because these were supposed to be protectors and not persecutors. They came There was a lot of euphoria. They came as a liberation movement, but unfortunately, the crimes they have committed, nobody now considers them to be a liberation movement. They are now more of a lot of bandits also have gotten involved, criminal gangs, and they are extorting the population. In as much as government also has not really done a lot, my fear is that the sense that they are winning might just prevent them from actually getting to root causes of the problem. And that might just be a kind of a Pyrrhic victory, because if we see the cycle of the Anglophone crisis or conflict, after 10 or 20 years, it bounces back. So the problem is, how do we solve the problem? No, let's say after 20 something, we look at 1990, that's from the 90s to 2016, 26 years. So a cycle of about 25 years, do we have a long-lasting solution where the form of a state becomes an issue, where both parties could sit and talk about the form of a state? Or do we sit and stay in denial and think that is business as usual, where force could be used, to browbeat the population, to trample on them, for them to stay quiet? If that's the solution, then it might not last long. So I just wanted to give you a brief overview of what is happening.
Yes, thank you very much. I imagine that even those from other countries who might not be very aware of the situation have a sort of an idea now, and where all of this is coming from. And this is very important because, as you indicated, although this has turned violent, but also it has been one of those conflicts around the world that one might say that are forgotten. There are these very forgotten conflicts that no one really talks about, and they are not really in the international media. Of course, as one of our topics of discussion, which you're going to also begin with, we will just to continue in line with what you were discussing, we wanted you to also discuss the sort of the current human rights situation in the country and the role of civil society since 2016, of which you've been particularly involved in. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Unfortunately, you look at geopolitics. You look at the interests of the major parties, the countries in the world, the 5 members of the Security Council. I had once attended a workshop in Senegal where one famous Nigerian advocate said something, that the fortunate thing about Cameroon is that nobody talks about them. They have succeeded. The Biya regime has succeeded in creating a scenario where Cameroon is not talked about in the international media, and that is something which works in the advantage of the government. Of recent, though, they've started talking about Cameroon, but when you look at the fact that Cameroon is a very important partner in the war against terrorism, helping the Western countries also to fight terrorism, and important partner in Boko Haram, and the fact that Cameroon is perceived to be the only stable region, most stable in our sub-region. If Cameroon goes down, it affects all the other countries. Some of the international, the bigger players just close their eyes on what is happening in Cameroon. Unfortunately, that's why also mainstream international media, the CNNs, the BBCs, the Al Jazeeras, the RFEs will not really talk about the situation in Cameroon, taking into consideration also that the country has friends in all the geopolitical zones in the world, so it puts them in an advantageous position. That was just a background with regards to the underreported situation in Cameroon. With regards to the human rights violations taking place within the context of the conflict in Cameroon, in the Southwest and Northwest in particular, and in the entire country in general, these are just the same violations that take place in a conflict. So there's no novelty. It might only be the bestiality of some of the violations which are committed. So, for example, there's the normal unlawful, arbitrary, and illegal arrest and detention, killing of the civilian population. I mean, clearly failure to protect the civilian on the part of the government. And you know that even when the fault comes from the non-state arms groups, the government is still responsible because the government owes a duty to protect civilian. You know, ransom, kidnapping. It's the order of the day, terrorizing the civilian population, maiming people, crimes against humanity, rape, you know, gender-based violence. It's also very common. Recruitment of children. We've seen instances where children have been recruited. Torture, cruel treatment, inhuman and degrading treatment is also very common in the conflict, because when they chop people's hands, psychological torture also is very important, because it's kind of collective punishment in an entire community. You know, for example, arson, burning down of complete villages, that is clearly psychological torture and collective punishment. You kill one police officer in a village and an entire village is burned down. One Amber boy thinks that there is somebody who doesn't support them in an area, they just come and shoot everybody there, or they just, you know, they declare 1 month ghost town, for example. That's clearly terrorizing the civilian population. Civil society has a role to play in wartime and in peacetime. But it gets worse when there is a conflict, you know, because also they are in danger. Human rights defenders are being attacked. You know, their safety and security is no guarantee. Journalists also, we've seen recently how many journalists have been killed in. One was recently killed. I think Anya was recently killed in Bamenda a few days ago. They too, I mean, because they report some of these violations, they are now targeted, you know, by both the state and the non-state armed group. Don't forget that prior to the conflict, it was only the state that became the perpetrator. But now, because of the conflict, you have the non-state armed group, which are equally also perpetrators of human rights violations. So civil society becomes very difficult for civil society organizations to play their role, and also because some of them, as a result of the fact that they are scared, some of them have taken sides, some of them have decided to support those who they feel might put their life in danger. But above all, civil society in Cameroon, they've been playing a wonderful role. You know, they've been doing advocacy, they've been creating awareness in terms of sensitization. They've been documenting, they've been reporting, they've been monitoring, they've been calling for a ceasefire. They've gone beyond the shores of the country. Some of them have gone to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights to articulate the situation in Cameroon. Some of them also participated in the Universal Periodic Report on Cameroon, which is coming up in Geneva in November. Some of them have gone to the Human Rights Council, you know, and they meet all the other stakeholders. Some of them, they contributed tremendously in the tour that happened, as we saw that some leaders of the non-state armed groups allowed kids to go to school. So they've been doing a lot of role behind the scene, peace facilitators. Some of them were involved in the Grand Dialogue, the Canadian peace process, and also the Southwest Northwest Women Task Force. Also, these are civil society groupings. Some of them do it individually and collectively. Don't forget the role played by the religious leaders also, you know, in trying to mediate and negotiate with both parties, but in condemning egregious crimes which are taking place in the country. Civil society, they've trained a lot of young men and women also on fighting gender-based violence, which has only increased as a result of the crisis. Civil society, they've supported internally displaced persons. They've provided psychosocial support, which is something which is not very common in the country. And I think that everybody in the Southwest and the Northwest region, but in Cameroon in its entirety, when you watch the gruesome murders and atrocities being committed, in a way, you need a kind of psychosocial support. So civil society has done that to help. They've provided also humanitarian assistance to victims or survivors, you know, of some of these of man-made and natural calamities that have come as a result of the crisis. there is still much that has to be done because also they operate within a very difficult context. One of the most difficult contexts that you can find in a conflict region is in Cameroon, in the southwest and the northwest, where you don't know who's the enemy, you don't know who can attack you. So they also need the training. They need the psychosocial training. They need training for their physical and digital safety. They need training also on how to monitor, how to report, how to document in a conflict situation. Because most of the civil society organizations that have been operating, none of them has ever faced what we have. So it's a novelty for us. So it's like a learning process that most people are just trying to come to terms with what is happening. So in the course of that, errors will be made, but I think that they've learned their lesson and they are doing an amazing work in terms of the protection and promotion. Unfortunately, they are not supported by government. Government considers them to be an enemy. The necessary support that government can provide, a law, for example, protecting human rights defender, which a country like Cote d'Ivoire has it. Some other countries are looking into it. Nothing is happening in Cameroon. They are also being attacked by the non-state armed groups. We have civil society leaders who have been threatened. Some of them have been kidnapped. Some of them no longer live in their houses. Some of them, they're really been threatened. So it's like a catch-22. Some of them have been forced to leave the country just because of their safety. Difficult situation. War crimes against humanity have been committed, and some of them are already clamoring for a Truth and Reconciliation Commission that should take place in Cameroon, and for the bigger players, the bigger perpetrators to be held accountable for the crimes that they've committed against the people. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barrister Felix, for that wonderful overview of the human rights situation in the country. Of course, we have our final panelist, Acheleke Christian, who just joined in right now, and I'm sure he will have the opportunity to introduce himself when he's going to speak. We were supposed to have, of course, Ma Esther Omam, who will be running late. In the meantime, we will have Baye Frida, who will, of course, discuss with us on the role of youths, how youths have been involved in the conflict and the situation right now, and also especially the place of young girls in the current conflict. And thank you very much. Baye Frida. Bye.
Thank you, Smith. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, Barrister. I'm happy to be on the same platform with Barrister today. He's a mentor and a great guide to me in the work I do in communities. So, Smith, looking at the ongoing armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon, young people from 2018 to 2020 were seen as the perpetrators of violence. But that scenario has changed greatly because there are so many young people-led organizations in the northwest and southwest regions in Cameroon who have been doing great work in rebuilding the lost hope that these young people in these two regions had for a very long time. I'm happy Mr. Acheleke Christian is here because he has been doing so much in this scene. Local Youth Corner has piloted so many peace building and community mediators programs in Cameroon. They did not just move from prison preneurs, they moved to peace mediators in all communities. They have the Improbably Dialogue program, whereby young people in different communities in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon, including other regions, come together, design, program, implement, and carry out, even through to the evaluation stage, this program for peace building in Cameroon, in all conflict regions in Cameroon, including the far north. Women and young people, especially young girls, were being left behind during this process. But when women-led organizations realized the important factor that young girls play in peace building, they were brought in. Through mentorship, through inclusive and more proactive programs, they were led at the front where they started building capacity of their peers in different communities and their schools. It is important to note that young girls were being used in most rural communities as victims of war. Their stories were being told by other people. But it came to such a point whereby they were being trained in storytelling, in communication, on how to tell their stories themselves, which is very important in trauma healing. Because if you go out there and say your story yourself, how you feel and how you're surviving, you become a survivor. And you'll be able to teach other young girls, other people, your peers, to follow in your footsteps. So they become peace ambassadors in their new locations, in their schools, in their communities, even in health sectors. So it is very, very important to realize that if we don't put young girls in front, and young people in particular, then the peace building space will not be complete. I will switch to women-led organizations because they are the ones championing these young girls in the different coalitions and movements. It is important to note that women have left the lamentation and now they're in evidence-based programming, whereby they use these surveys, these results from the field to better interpret solutions that can end this ongoing crisis in the Northwest regions and Southwest regions of Cameroon. Looking at the civilian population bearing the brunt of the war on their bodies and their livelihoods, it is mandatory for young people to lead the process. They occupy a majority of this pain. Young girls have been raped. Young boys are seen as the perpetrators of this act because they are young, but they have moved from that angle to being peace builders, to being the ones championing hate speech mitigations in Cameroon, to be at the forefront of programming. We have, for example, Defy Hate Now. It's been led by a very young man, and he's doing immensely great in this space. They have not only championed Tech for Peace, which BAWAC Cameroon is part of the process. They have also included young journalists, especially female journalists, into this process so that they can better interpret the concept they are trying to solve the ongoing armed conflict through hate speech and xenophobia prevention in Cameroon. We also have the Peace Academy run by a very young person, Samuel. We also have organizations run by young women, Emily Mickey, for example, the Dennis Mickey Foundation, that she has been working from the grassroots to the regional level, promoting peace clubs, promoting gender-based violence prevention programs in schools. Coming back to BAWAC Cameroon has the Skills for Peace training program for young people, especially young girls, where they are being trained in IT, communication, project management, so that these skills, they can go back into their communities to preach peace, to prevent conflict from the household to the community and to their schools. So looking at grassroots leadership, we are not leaving that behind because there are young people that have been trained to take part in the peace building processes in these communities, especially in the rural area, despite the high insecurity and risks that they face. But we have made it known to them that they have to be part of this peace building process, because without young people in this space, then the peace building process is far from over. Mr. Achaleke will talk more on that, and I will go back to women in the peace building space since Ma Omam is not around to talk on that. Women face the brunt of the war on their bodies and their livelihoods. And it is very important for women to be at the forefront in human rights reporting, in monitoring, and in humanitarian assistance in these fragile settings. Now, we have moved past lamentation campaign. We are now into coalitions and movements, because teamwork makes the dream work. So we collaborate with other women-led organizations so that together we strengthen the civic space where women have been known in the past, due to patriarchal reasons, to be behind while the men lead in peace negotiations. But that changed greatly in 2018 when the Southwest Northwest Women's Task Force entered the scene, and they have been moving from strength to strength. Not only strengthening women-led organizations, but also youth-led organizations, especially ones led by young girls. Faith-based movements and traditional rulers have been our focus too, as we at Bara Cameroon, for example, with Defy Hate Now, had to train all traditional rulers in FACO on hate speech and xenophobia, so that with these tools, especially social media tools, they could easily fact check, they could easily understand trends, and better give their communities the right position when matters on hate speech come up and how to prevent it. Looking at the unified programming at Defy Hate, for example, where young people, women, and even religious leaders are brought in to prevent conflict in different communities in the Southwest and Northwest regions of Cameroon, it is important to note that the risks of atrocities will continue if the government and the separatists don't sit on a dialogue table and examine the root causes of this crisis. We will keep going ahead with capacity building programs, strengthening the civic space, but if the root causes of the Anglophone crisis are not being addressed, then we'll be putting a lot of funding, a lot of resources, both financial and personal resources, to waste. So going back to Barrister, we still insist that the root causes of the ongoing armed conflict, the Anglophone crisis, should be addressed so that women will do better work in their communities. Looking at security forces implicated in violations of international humanitarian laws, the extrajudicial killings, kidnappings from both sides, the armed groups and the state armed groups, it is important to note that if there are mechanisms put in place to prevent this and protect women and girls, especially, who are at the forefront of peace building in Cameroon, then more work will be done in this space. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much, by Frida. Thank you for that overview on the work that women and youth are doing on the ground. I see that we have some things in the chat, but we are just going to move over to Gabi Ambo, who, just a reminder, we also have this event running live streaming live on YouTube, on the center's YouTube page. And then, of course, so as part of also this advocacy strategy, you heard Barrister earlier on talk about the Ngunme case, which was a decision by the African Commission on the issue of self-determination of the Southern Cameroons. So we are looking at ways, we are looking at how we can implement, and how, if the Cameroonian government properly implements the recommendations of this recommendations given by the African Commission, how these can help in the present situation of Cameroon right now. So we are going to be having Gabi Ambo of Finders Group Initiative, who will discuss that with us right now. Thank you very much. Hello, Gabi. Okay, while we wait for Gabi to come on, we have Achaleke Christian. Achaleke, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I can hear you. Thank you very much. Welcome, and please introduce yourself and your organization.
Well, thank you very much. And it's indeed a pleasure to join this conversation. My name is Christian Achaleke, and I serve as the Executive Director of Local Create Corner Cameroon, which is a youth-led organization. We have offices in 4 regions of the country, and we focus on promoting youth participation in peace building, and we're a youth-led organization in terms of work. It's difficult for me to introduce myself always, but I wear different hats, including serving with African Union as the ambassador for peace and security for the Central Africa region. So, I mean, that's basically my background, but I've been working on peace and security for almost 15 years, and I've worked in other conflict hotspots across the globe. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And I know that this is sort of a big jump in the conversation, but of course, I would want to find out, to your estimation and based on the work that you have been doing, maybe in the far north and also, of course, in the northwest and southwest, what do you consider to be like the major obstacles in the current the resolution of the current conflict, and where do you think we are now within the conflict in terms of resolution and negotiations? Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much. So, I mean, this is a very important conversation, and maybe I would frame my reflection into four key parts. I mean, what is stifling the process? I think the first thing is that we had a conflict that emerged at a period where the country as it is was made up of different other challenges, and where systems were not in their optimum, where cultures and people's way of resolving conflict were not strengthened. So by this, I'm saying that we were having this conflict built on when people were still thinking that to fight, it's a good thing, you know, where we unfortunately had not learned from the experiences of other countries, you know, and where even in terms of resolving things like dialogue that we are talking every day, these are things that are not common in our space.
I see that we have just lost Achaleke. I think that the internet situation in the country is a bit bad.
Hello, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we have you back. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Yeah, so I was saying that so when reflections around resolving the conflict, you know, were emanating, the truth is that a lot of the stakeholders were not ready because there was a lot of drive in terms of naming, shaming, condemning, rather than reflecting on how to build a culture of solving the problem. So I think this is one of the reasons why, and that's why even proposed dialogue initiatives and all of that have had issues in terms of delivering results, because people were still in the spirit of, you know, activism, naming, shaming, than, you know, looking at it from a peace building lens. Now, I work as a peace builder, and it's a long time, and I've seen different conflict situations. I've worked there, I've seen how it is. The challenge is always when people focus a lot on condemning, and blaming than looking for the solution. So, and in this case, if you look at processes, for example, the Grand National Dialogue, was reflected upon and all of that, the investment in life after, was not as much as the investment to organize, I mean, these are some of the challenges that we have, because within the peace and security conversation, I was part of working on the UN Security Council resolution on young people's participation in peace processes, which is 2419. And within the framework of this resolution, we developed a model called the 3 layers of peace processes, which is inside the room, beside the room, and outside the room. I think that we are failing to be able to take a step away from amazing conversations we have in Canada, in Switzerland, and all of that, because we have not been able to recognize that the person who is in Kumba is as important as that person who sat in that room, in Canada to reflect on something. And this was framed because exclusion of people in these processes will always be the problem. How many young people were taken into this conversation? How many young women were brought into this conversation? Yet we want to include them. At the same time, we exclude them from very important parts of the conversation. And at the end of the day, who are the ones to implement? These are young people, because we make up 75% of the country's population. So I think that the processes have been having issues because of that intentional exclusion of credible voices, not necessarily about the ones who are leading, but also the ones who are suffering and the ones who are going to suffer the most. By virtue of nature, if you are 40 years old, you should be able to die before a young person who's 20 years old. It means that there is the importance of intentionally putting young people in this process. I think that's where we are having the challenges. In 2019, we published Youth and Peace Processes, Opportunities and Challenges. Now, when we were working on this publication, we realized that, another level of the challenge has been the issue of capacity. We focus a lot on building processes. We don't focus on building the capacity of those who are going to implement these processes. I take, for example, we have been reflecting on dialogues. Dialogues are not conferences. Dialogues are specific processes that has key values and ethos that must be used in these processes. Now, I've seen a lot of people saying they are doing dialogue, but trust me, they are doing conferences that dialogue. Because if we want to engage in dialogue, there's the importance to develop a tool and a model that will be able to be a living document that will stand the test of time. So the National Dialogue, for example, was there a tool, a model, a guide that was developed to build people's capacity before, during, and after? These are the questions we have to start asking ourselves. So the issue of capacity remains a very big issue why the processes are failing. I always used to share this example, in one of a high-level UN meeting when we were reflecting on young people and violent extremism in New York. And we were speaking in the room and talking about CVE. And there was this politician, respected where he's coming from. He thought we were talking about civics and ethics. Now, imagine that you have people to support processes when they do not have capacity. So I think my recommendation is that why we are investing to develop these processes, we need to focus on building the capacity of the different stakeholders, be it government, be it civil society and others, so that they will be able to bring in constructive, input to the processes. We feel dialogue is so easy, but it's not as easy as we think. Because when we were working on the improbable dialogue process, we took 1 year to develop the tool guide, 1 year before we started even doing anything. How much do we take our time to prepare? It's a very important conversation. The third thing, which I think it's also missing, is the fact that the culture of dialogue is not in our mainstream, unfortunately. And that's why I've always recommended that it's important that we start from a bottom top. So while the top is happening, the bigger strategic conversation, it is critical that we start engaging people from the bottom so that they can be able to appreciate what is happening at the top. During the study that we had, we spoke to a couple of people. What do you think about the Swiss dialogue and all of that? They had no idea. So how do you expect that, perspectives come from the global or the bigger picture, and these people are able to make use of, and they are able to engage with it in the community? I think this is a very, very important part. And the fourth thing, which I think remains, a key issue, is that people are working in silos. I really appreciate what the women are doing, where they have the network, though they have their issues, but the fact that you are able to come together to work is very critical. Within the youth space, we are working so hard to ensure that that could happen, where we can look above or beyond the different mandates of our institution or the whole donor resource mobilization politics and all of that, because sometimes it becomes toxic and it prevents opportunities for us to build on every investment that has been made. A lot of money is being pumped in. Let's look at the result. Is it matching? I will tell you no. And this is because we are working in silos. We see people reinventing the wheel rather than building on existing wheel. I think these are four key things which we can see that they are key issues. But I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I'm sure that in the reflection that Frida was sharing, Frida gave examples of young people, of youth organizations that are taking action. It's a big opportunity. I've been in this space for 15 years. I will tell you, some 5, 6, 7 years ago, we had very few youth organizations that were registered. Now, as we speak, we have a multitude of them. This is a very good sign because it demonstrates, key interests of young people who historically have been seen as troublemakers, historically have been seen as victims, but we are seeing them wanting to be part of the solution. And I think we need to invest in this demographic dividend. We need to invest in this high interest, which is coming from young people, so that we can be able to approach a peer-to-peer engagement in resolving some of the realities. It would interest you that in 2019, when we were working on developing a youth mediators network in Cameroon, we met young people who are specialized in doing mediation in DDR. Now, mediation in DDR is one of the most complicated mediation processes, where you convince someone to leave the bush, and join the path to peace. We met young people like this. Why are we not leveraging and building on such genuine interest that we have from young people? Why working with this youth? We met young people who are gifted when it comes to mental health, psychosocial support. Are we leveraging on these core values? We saw young girls who are great at mobilizing in their communities. We are not leveraging on this demographic dividend we have in the context of Cameroon. And in terms of concrete recommendation, stakeholders, donors, institutions must, this is not bargaining. We are not bargaining this. It's a must invest in young people's agency, especially around issues of peace, human rights, and others. We must see you champions. We must see new champions. Sometimes I feel old. I'm 33 years old, but I'm already feeling old. And I'm imagining that we should have champions who are 17, 18, 19. We should be able to carry this baton. You will bear with me. This conflict is not something that we are looking at, for a short term. This is something that is entrenched in people's identity and others, meaning our approach needs to be able to be futuristic. And that is why I'm recommending there is a critical need not to look at children as well as victims only. We need to start speaking to children and listening to their perspectives and building a culture of peace in these children to achieve what we are seeing. Frida said something very important, building skills of children so that they can become champions. In the Far North region, I will tell you, we developed a program called Salam School for children who were affected by Boko Haram. There was this young boy whose parents had been killed by Boko Haram. When we started our school, free school, he didn't want to speak. For months, he was not expressing himself. Trust me, 1 year down the line, he's amazing, he's super, and he's even giving us ideas on how we can be able to build peace. I have been working in global conversation around the role of children. I'm very sure that we should not only look at children as victims. In the Anglophone conflict, we are undermining the role of children. Many of them have been used, to foment violence and crime and all of that. There is the need for us to change that perspective and start investing in the children from primary school right up to where we have them, so that it will be critical for some of us, for Barrister Gwabala and others, to see the kind of people that they can give the relay baton to. Because there will be a time where if I get into a space of young people to speak, I will not be speaking in the words of young people. I will be speaking as a mentor. It is critical we build this new champion. To round off, My rounding up would be in terms of what is inspiring the next generation. What is inspiring the next generation is that we are seeing that slowly but surely, with little resources or even support, young people are risking their lives. They don't care about protection because they want to bring change. I think this is something that we must write home with. Secondly, women are showing us the way that we have to work together despite our differences to be part of the process. Thirdly, we need to move from pressure groups and activism, from lamentation to action, developing processes, and we are seeing that happening. And finally, there is the critical need for government and every other stakeholder to see every challenge that we are facing as an opportunity to build a renewed energy for a better country. So, I mean, these are my reflections in terms of this, and I'm sure if there are more questions, I should be able to take on. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Achaleke. Thank you so much for this, the great work that you do and this reflection. I mean, I wanted to discuss something about relating to how prepared, how prepared CSOs are, how prepared youth organizations are, if in case they were supposed to be called on in terms of to sort of get their idea as to where they want the country to go, in terms of constitutional changes, changes in the institutions. But I think maybe you can do a little draft on that while we go to Gabi Ambo, who will be discussing on the Gunme case and the recommendations thereof. I hope that he is connected now. Gabi Ambo, who is the Executive Director of Finders Group Initiative. Thank you very much. Hello, Gabi.
Yes, Smith, I'm right here.
Okay, yes, thank you. You can please go on.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity once more to harp on the decision of the African Commission with respect to the Gubne case brought on by SCAPO and CNC. This is something that happened sometime in 2009. In as much as we do admit that the dynamics on ground have changed, there are still elements of the recommendations of that decision that definitely can contribute greatly in actually showing the way out of the ongoing protracted armed conflict that has been developed in Northwest and Southwest. To get there, just to say a little bit that Gabi Ambo and Finders Group Initiative actually have been into a lot of human rights work for 24 years, raiding in the circumstance prior to the coming of the ongoing protracted armed conflict that actually commenced, in 2016 in that order. I just want to state that, it's important for us to understand that, the dynamics on ground are gradually changing, have actually changed quite a lot, since all of this from the historical perspective and legal perspective as presented by Barrister Felix Agobala, from the origin of all of this, a lot kind of has changed on ground. So there have been gross violations from 1961 up to the current moment, before pressure groups like this, had to carry on. Am I being seen? I'm not seeing myself. Is there something wrong?
I don't think your video is on, but we can hear you clearly. Oh, yes, we can see you now. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, sorry about all of that. I just want to start by saying that the element that can be used in contributing in rolling up the conflict that's on ground and being able to change the dynamics on ground as well will warrant quite a lot of multifaceted actions to be taken by all parties on board, to contribute our quota in this regard. But to get to the decision of the African Commission on Human Rights with respect to the Ngubne case, I just want to first of all say a little bit of highlight about why who FGR is and what has been on ground for over a while. This is a structure that has been on for over 24 years. the person over 24 years and the structure over 15 years so far. And we actually have engaged a lot of actions on ground to bring redress, to victims of human rights violations way back, prior to the commencement or the ignitement of the ongoing protracted armed conflict that we have followed for 6 years running down the line in this order. This decision came on way about 9 years before even the situation on ground crop up. And those were basically concerns that have been there long enough. There had been no... Is something wrong?
No, that's okay. It was just someone else. That's fine.
Can I go ahead?
Yes, please. Yes.
Yes, so that's how the situation was on ground, and adopting all Felix had said, but to have a little exception to the fact that, the opinions on ground vary. It may not just be swaying on one side, as the thinking may be. They vary until you have to carry out the study. Referring back to the study that Cardinal Toomey and the other followers did carry, the statistics are out there speaking for themselves. And that, there has been quite much resistance on ground from both ends to ensure that, we can move on and be able to get all of this behind us. It should definitely be taken into consideration in that regard as well. So HRDA actually has been handled cases, providing legal assistance with networks and synergies and taking personal actions at the level of organizations. It has a battery of lawyers, 10 battery of lawyers who actually are engaging all of these actions, providing rights, the thousands of cases that have been won in court, bringing redress for victims without asking for any money in that circumstance. We have actually contributed a lot on ground, to go to roll up the conflict. As I would not know Barrister Felix, with whom we met in Dakar, Senegal, on issues with Amnesty International concerning actions that they have been taken on the Northwest-Southwest issue, which actually was at its primary in 2018. Coming to the judgment of the commission, we are saying precisely that without much ado, the recommendations, after having recognized the Southern Cameroonians, called them the Northwest and Southwest, whatever name you call them, West Cameroon, whatever name, they are a people as recognized by the commission. But they went further in their recommendations to state that the respondent state, which is the Republic of Cameroon, should go to abolish certain practices which definitely do not conform to democratic principles and norms around the world. So in that regard, they made the abolition of discrimination of practices against people of Northwest and Southwest Cameroon, including equal usage of the English language in business transactions, stop the transfer of accused persons from the Anglophone provinces for trial in the Francophone provinces. These are actually things that were going on ground, and this decision just helps on that. Ensures that every person facing criminal charges be tried under the language he or she understands. In the alternative, the respondent state must ensure that interpreters are employed in courts to avoid jeopardizing the rights of accused persons. Locate national projects equitably throughout the country, most especially with attention to Northwest and Southwest, and the economic viability as well as regional balance. Pay compensation for companies. In our case now, you realize that not just be the companies, but element of victims and families that actually have been brought down, have suffered all of this. We're talking about something close to over 5,000 have been killed. 5,000 persons that have been killed in this ongoing protracted armed conflict, and more are adding by the day. And we are calling to say that this recommendation actually calls and makes quite more reason at this new level where we are, and that we enter into constructive dialogue with complainants, and in particular SCNC and SCAPO. This case now, the dynamics on ground have changed in the circumstances. You realize that the dialogue requested for is one of the most englobing things that the entire world is asking for. But how it will change, just like Ataleke asked there, what kind of dialogue is it? How do we prepare to get such a dialogue in place? How does it actually affect takes off? Where does it go? Who comes on board? And all of this has to be structured in a way that, we shouldn't have lesser voices to complain, that, larger voices, to go to disagree on what's going on ground in the circumstance. So we're expecting that a dialogue like Felix talked about the field, Barrister Felix Abubala talks about the field Swiss facilitation talks, and the field Cameroon talks in Canada, which opted for the Canadians to facilitate. Just when the Canadians accepted not to facilitate, the government backtracked on that very decision in 3 days down the line. These are elements of bad faith, which we definitely cannot see how this actually holds on ground. So it will take the government, just as recommended by the African Commission on Human Rights, to be politically ready and willing. It should demonstrate the political will, how they can be able to get these actions on ground, how they are willing to, first of all, accept that there is a problem. Because when you accept a problem, you're at the beginning of healing. You're at the beginning of solving the problem. Accepting is part solution in the circumstance. When you do not admit that the problem exists, that's where the greatest challenge actually lies. As you do not expect them to back out of this. These are recommendations from the African Commission in that regard, in a decision that was passed 9 years prior to the ongoing conflict. Because if these things were arrested way back then, we would not be where we are today. In as much as we do admit that the commission as well recommended, the reform of the High Judicial Council by ensuring that it is composed of personalities other than the president and the Minister of Justice and other members of the executive branch. I will have to say here, not necessarily disagree, but to say that so far as the president remains the head of that body, you can change all the 1,001 persons that are there. The power lies in the president and the decision lies with him. So I would just want to recommend, and in order to buttress this fact, but to stand a little distance to say that, the Higher Judicial Council is a structure like any other structure. In as much as it has much powers to determine certain actions, who goes to where and who plays what kind of role, it's important that let's have more on the bigger picture. And the bigger picture here will be a dialogue. The dialogue that has been recommended, by the commission, to ensure that, they let the key players come on board. This will be a healing process. Wherever it will be engaged, it will take the parties' consent to decide on that. But the greater political will lies with the government of Cameroon to ensure that this be done and seem to have been done in that circumstance, and then we can carry on in that regard. And then the responsibility that was given to the SCAPO and then SCNC, to say SCAPO stands for Southern Cameroon People Organization, and then SCNC is the Southern Cameroon National Council. In the circumstance, this were a pressure group that existed in Cameroon then, we're pressing now for the identity of the people of Southern Cameroon, the identity of the people of West Cameroon, and the identity of the people you call Northwest and Southwest today in Cameroon in that circumstance. So just to make sure that they be recognized and have their place in the civilized world in which we all are. I suppose that is not asking too much, but it takes the government to go to respond to that, as the African Commission actually has requested here, and is asking this pressure groups to translate into political parties within the government of Cameroon, for them to go to be able to play the political game and get the positions they want and join the others in that regard. Now they should abandon the secessionist tendencies, which is actually at its best now, and you definitely will be finding it challenging given the flaring of tempers and the drag of the trouble on ground that has taken this long. 6 years is now 6 days, and so the positions have hardened in the circumstance that for us to get the people back to where we expected the 9 years back may become challenging, but there's nothing wrong in trying. There's nothing wrong in being able to make an effort to see what contributions come on board, to see how we actually go ahead. First of all, that will be determined when the national dialogue, whatever name we call it, national dialogue of whichever form, will be held at whatever level, by the parties concerned, by the party, in an area determined by them, and with somebody to go to moderate and be able to orient them, be able to gather and write, and that to get such a dialogue, it will warrant that there should be pre-sessions that will prepare the two parties, belligerent in that case, who will be preparing to get into the dialogue to address the concerns. When the such dialogue meets and address those concerns, I definitely want to believe that all the rest will fall in place, and this will help us to go to start recognizing the internal structures that definitely has to fit in place and show how well we move on with this. The African Commission places its good offices at the disposal of the parties to mediate. And we hope that this role will be there still available for the government of Cameroon and the Amazonian fighters on ground not able to take advantage of that and seize the commission. Can the commission still play this role? We wouldn't ask this question because they need to give the commission the chance to vote to ensure that it can play that role. So we're thinking now that if the commission can come on board, that will definitely be fine. And we request the parties, in this case, not just the SCAPO, my thinking, and SCNC, since most of them have been arrested and detained, we will get, the protagonists in the ongoing conflict, to get to determine all of those actions. That only can happen with the political will demonstrated by the government on ground, and such that we can get out of this situation as we find it on ground in that circumstance. That said, I wish to reiterate the point that the implementations of decisions of commissions don't have legal force in the sense as in a normal court session. So this would take an extra edge, by the African Union General Assembly, to commit further to ensure that it will be able to put in place missions or structures on ground that will lead, to this takeoff of this supposed dialogue that we are craving for. And that definitely is going to better the lives of each and every one. Before we get down to the constitutional talks, and that definitely will be recommended, I think the dialogue session, beginning with the prefaces of the session, wherever they hold, and the stakeholders, will give us a lot of meaning, and it will help quite a lot for us to roll on and move on with what's on ground, and so that we can save the innocent persons that are being killed. We can save the people who are caught in the crossfire. We can begin to ensure the full respect of the Geneva principles and to ensure the principles of war, and be able to respect Resolution 1612 of the United Nations Security Council, which actually harps on the 6 grave violations that children should not be caught in crossfire. They should not be killed or maimed. No school should not be attacked. Hospitals should not be attacked. There should be no sexual violence or abuse. And there should not deny to humanitarian services in that circumstance, and not more. We crave and believe that if this is taken into consideration, we're going to move on faster and let the parties sit, talk, and get us out of this. Thank you so very much. I hope I'm having some challenges here. I hope everyone is getting me. I hope you got me, Smith, and the others. So that's exactly where I think I can stop there and then maybe get some questions which I need to actually shed more light on that. Thank you so very much.
Yes, absolutely, Gabi. Thank you so much for your presentation. And of course, the audience have been made aware of this GUNME decision. Of course, we know that one of the challenges as well of the decisions of the African Commission are that they are not well publicized. Sometimes, of course, the Center for Human Rights, of course, is doing a lot of work in terms of doing law reports that publicize the decisions of the Commission and the African Court. But a lot of people sometimes are not aware, of what of these recommendations that are made and how they can be implemented on the ground to change situations. Of course, this decision was made a very long time ago, and we're talking about it now because we feel that it has some relevance, because it has led to the fact that all of these grievances that were addressed in the past, that were raised in the past, were not addressed, right? That is why we have led to these it has evolved to this armed conflict that it is today. You talked about the recommendation about the SCAPO and SCNC, and we know that the question can also always be asked, if they were even allowed the opportunity to become duly constituted political parties in the country, for them to be adequately involved, So we find that even they were not allowed this opportunity, so that they can be able to participate within the democratic process. And I guess that is one of the issues that you can say that the Anglophone grievances are coming from, where you have this political disenfranchisement of a particular population. And so that was one of the follow-up questions that I wanted to have for Frida, for you, and Achaleke. I don't know if he has gone offline, and of course, Barrister as well. In terms of like the available information, right? Sometimes maybe the population is acting on rhetoric and saying that, well, we have been marginalized. This thing is happening in this country. But do you think that there is appropriate, reliable information out there? Is the civil society doing much? Has there been any publication, any information out there that you can really indicate that this is where the Anglophones are being marginalized? This is the problem. Can that be clearly identified by everyone?
Yes, Smith. Thank you so very much for the interesting question you're asking. The civil society in Cameroon has done quite a lot on ground. They have done quite a lot, and they're continuously doing it, even with or without the means. They have dedicated and sacrificed themselves to push on the actions on ground to contribute in rolling off the ongoing conflict, which definitely is not pleasing to either party in that circumstance. So they have done quite a lot. But to say the literature on ground, where they have the material on ground or the documented or documents actually they can cite to refer to. We have a few of such because, first of all, there are challenges in terms of financing, actually documenting all of that. No, they need capacity as well, to get all of this assembled in that circumstance. Like I just adopted everything my collaborators earlier spoke, what Barrister Felix said about capacity needed, what Frida said about capacity needed, what Ajaleke said about capacity needed. We need capacity most especially at the stages where we're beginning to engage, this way out of the ongoing conflict in that circumstance. So we need that capacity for who sits on board and how we actually can roll on. What definitely are the discussions we should be having on board? Are we actually orienting in a way to deprive some other person of his or her own right? We need to give everyone a fair right, to freely express themselves. Like I cited, the Katina Tumi's decision. At least that one is out. That's just about civil society work. The percentage that they did value of whether Southern Cameroonians are ready to work with the Republic of Cameroon, they want to be on their own, or they want to join in a special way, other federation or whatever confederation or whatever name, or being independent, or whatever name, all those things that were done, those thoughts can be found. But much of the work of civil society organizations is not documented because of the issues I just raised out there. And going back to the SCNC and the SCAPO response to the request of the commission, as you've rightly said, it was a dying and challenging time because it was a highly political moment, and that definitely the people would definitely not succeed in engaging in registering as political parties. I wouldn't want to say they had made an attempt, not to the best of my knowledge. Maybe if they had made an attempt, they would look from there to see if actually they had engaged and what were the obstacles, if there were any. But because they thought that it wasn't the right thing to do, maybe they did not go further. That maybe Barrister Felix can handle that better, or the other panelists in that circumstance. But I think that the civil society in Cameroon is doing a formidable job, most especially at such a challenging time. I want to tell you something very interestingly, for you to know that human rights defenders on ground in Cameroon, have been at daggers drawn, most especially with the authorities of the government, because it sees them more as enemies rather than collaborators, because you realize that government policy can only be successful on ground with the work of the civil society, because we're like accomplishing the government policy in that circumstance. But yet the government stakeholders see us from an angle of antagonism, from an angle of enmity and all of those things, which we don't expect to see happen. I do understand as well, I do agree as well that some of us actually do confront these authorities from a perspective, from an angle that definitely is not cordial, is not accepted, is not reasonable. But I don't think there's a majority that does that. So we could actually be able to work, like some of us have been working with the administration successfully for over the years, not meaning that we are buying their narrative or they are buying our narrative, but they take us for who we are, for the credibility we have demonstrated, because we have been before the African Commission. We had a similar case of this nature. We're still working with the Cameroon government to ensure that the 7 decisions that were taken before that committee be respected to the letter. The government is just on the first of the 7. This is something that happened in 2018, though, and we are pushing on in that circumstance. We're not walking away from it. We're working, trying to reason with government to see how we can resolve this. So we can do a lot more other things in this direction. Even as individual civil society organizations, and most especially when we are networks and in the civil society, we can actually properly engage and use other key persons within our ranks who have the expertise while waiting for others to be trained, to engage action to move on.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabby. I don't know if Frida is still with us. But Frida, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, thank you very much.
I'm managing the network.
Yes.
That's how I'm putting my video on so that it doesn't disappoint me.
Right. So we were discussing earlier on, and I wanted the barrister and as well as Achaleke to, because I mean, we, like I was indicating earlier, we have all of these I don't know, capacity building that we have done over the years, right? I mean, I've worked a lot with yourself, and a lot with Gabi, building civil society actors, the capacity for civil society actors in various issues, human rights and all of that. But there is the problem that always comes, right? Do we know if the civil society organizations are well capacitated, you know, to represent, you know, to have their voice heard and to have good recommendations, like I was indicating earlier. If in terms we're supposed to say that, okay, we need constitutional changes in the country, we need institutional changes in the country, do we have, you know, like a good roadmap as to what exactly needs to be done, what needs to be changed in institutions, in the laws that should properly orient the country?
Should I take that? Okay, I will go back to the risks and the root causes of the ongoing armed conflict in Cameroon. We'll look at the poor quality of the government services, the weak governance, and the marginalizations of part of the population, especially from the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. If all of that is addressed, I bet you, we sit on that dialogue table. They are young people, they are women, they are men who have been trained, who have been in service for a very long time to see this happen. So all is going to work out. The government just have to have good faith. The people are willing. They have built their capacity at all levels, grassroots, regional and national. They are people, they are young people who are ready, on the go. I was observer and advisor to the Swiss Peace Local Youth Corner Improbable Dialogue Program. And I bet you it's amazing to watch, to observe these young people, what has been built in them, in designing, in executing, in evaluating peace building programs in Cameroon to mitigate the ongoing armed conflict in the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon. So we are ready.
Okay, thank you very much. We just have Barrister on now. He has just connected back on. And Barrister, are you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, yes, thank you very much. Just a follow-up on the question that I was just, Frida was just answering just now. I was asking as to how prepared the civil society are in terms of proposing constitutional changes and changes in the various institutions in Cameroon, whether the civil society has a proper roadmap as to where the country should be leading. Thank you.
Yeah, with regards to whether civil society has a roadmap to where the country, a few civil society organizations, I don't want to say frontline civil society, we came together also and we prepared a roadmap prior to the Grand Dialogue that we submitted to the Prime Minister, and we've been constantly meeting on working on things like electoral reform, the fight against corruption, and the way we see Cameroon in terms of devolution of power. So yes, we have
I think the network.
Yes.
I think the barrister is having issues with his network.
Yes.
But okay. Gabi, do you have any response? Do you have any?
Yes, I have something to say before the barrister comes back. I just want to say, for us to be honest with ourselves, there are certain things we talk about dealing with the past. When you have to deal with the past, I know often it comes when a conflict has come to an end. You have to begin with the truth. You begin with justice. and you get to the compensations or reparations, and then you get to reconstruction. These are steps that definitely need to be engaged in a genuine way and to ensure that we contribute our quota. The question is, do we need to wait to the end of the conflict for us to bring on board this categorization, or can we engage them at this stage in the middle of the conflict and see how well we can select the ones that are adaptable and start getting them on ground in that circumstance, or we wait, it is logical. And I think even right now we can start talking and being honest to ourselves. There's nothing wrong in having truth commissions within our communities. There's nothing wrong in having, those kind of sessions amongst us, as they're referring to the youth, they're referring to the women, and why not the men? Able to create such sessions or so bodies within the communities, not necessarily going at the macro level, to see how we can start talking to each other and bringing each other to understanding where we are coming from, where we are, and where we intend to go. And so with that reasoning and that understanding, it may contribute greatly in changing the dynamics on ground before the bigger picture is engaged. Before the real dialogue begins, these actions definitely will be ongoing to determine certain elements that actually are distracting most population on ground to go to focus on what's right in that circumstance. Agreed that a lot has gone down the drain. Agreed that the people of Southern Cameroon's rights have been fully violated. There's no denying that fact. We need acknowledgement, and then we need a way forward in that circumstance. These are processes that we must cease to use and to engage them, and so we can be able to bring this matter to a logical end. It's a simple issue that can be done. It takes the political will to do so.
Right. Thank you, Gabi. I mean, this has been an interesting conversation, but there is the talk about justice. I mean, I saw a comment in the chat box where someone says all of us are talking about we are talking about peace. Who is talking about justice? Can you address that in a bit?
Yes. What I want to address in line with that, I'll get back to the DWP dealing with the past. It has justice as one of the key pillars. It's a commission, of course, which definitely has to be created at the end of conflicts to go to see how we bring redress to those who have been afflicted over time. That begins with being truthful to ourselves, being honest to ourselves about what happens on ground. And that's why truth comes first. And after the truth, we have the justice commission actually will set in. And then we'll now move to the area of compensation after justice has taken effect. That justice may not necessarily be the justice you and I are thinking of. It could be justice that is, first of all, that at level of acknowledgement of what actually happened and take full responsibility for our own responsibilities. And then we'll now move on to reach out to each other to say, yes, please forgive me, I did this, I did this. This is being justiciable in our actions. And from there, the other cases will be taken by the bigger picture or the macro level, which we may have to warrant certain key actors who had violated the Geneva Principles or the principles of warfare, to go to seize under the courts that are necessary, to address such concerns in that circumstance. But at our level, from the dealing with the past approach, we can begin to actually start acknowledging from the commission, like I said, about what truly is the situation on ground, who truly actually is afflicted, why is it, what can we do? Apply the 5 W's here. What happened, where, when, why, who was involved? How can we get out all of this? This can contribute quite a lot, in changing the dynamics on ground. So justice is playing a very cardinal and key role. Let's not make a mistake. You realize that in the dealing with the past, there's no mention of peace anywhere. It has mentioned the element that will bring peace to prevail, because peace is not talked down on people. Peace is lived as per the actions that actually have triumphed through people's interactions, not to accept the atmosphere or to accept the situation in which they are, and to say, yes, we have arrived, and now we can reach out to each other. We can leverage with each other, we can communicate, we can accept each other as one of us, as our own. And we can build there as one people to grow up in that circumstance. Without that, I definitely will be missing the point in that circumstance. That's what I'm insisting on, the 4 pillars of the dealing with the past process, which are truth, justice, reparations, and reconstruction. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gabi. That was very insightful. I see Barrister is on now.
Yeah,
The network
sorry, the network. Yes, no, what I was saying is that, yes, civil society has an agenda. We've been working with others, but civil society is a reflection of our country, also the division. But I followed the other speakers. What we should understand also that a country is not breaking down into youth, women, and the others. Okay, a country includes youth, women, and the others, because what I see is that yes, the youth might be doing an amazing thing, but you cannot operate in isolation. And unfortunately, the world is run by adult males, okay? Exactly. Meaning that you have to bring all these compartments together for a successful peace building, democracy, election, or whatever. So how do we bring all of these, these groupings together? That is the challenge. Because if women are doing things in isolation, youths are doing it, without any coordinated effort, it might not lead to any successes. So there is a need to look at things from a very holistic perspective, meaning that the movement must have youth, must have women, for it to succeed. But if the youth think that, okay, fine, because we are the highest, the higher population, we can focus on ourselves or the women, then it doesn't work. At the end of the day, we would come back to the same point of things not happening. So there is a need for that coordinated effort so that we can achieve the goals that we intend for our people. And then equally also, there's a lot of grandstanding in civil society also. A lot of people like to pamper the egos. They want to tell people what they want to hear. I know that's also a problem that we have as civil society. There are very few people who are daring. Nobody says you should put yourself in harm's way, but there are very few who are daring. So most people only get involved in the regular things to protect their bread and butter. On serious issues, very few people speak out. And when very few people speak out, the few who speak out, is easier to victimize the few who speak out. But if most of the civil society organization, they speak out on serious things, it might be difficult to victimize everybody, because the state will not have the capacity and the means to victimize everybody. My point is, at the end of the day, as a society, we need to go back to the drawing board. And we are not only talking about the issue of peace, the return of peace in the Southwest and Northwest or in the Far North. We are talking about a new Cameroon that would respect equality, justice, fairness, basic human rights. A new Cameroon where if you are in the North, South, East, or West, you have the same benefits by dint of the fact that you are a Cameroonian, not by dint of the fact that you know a particular person or you come from a particular tribe, region, or religion. For that to be done, there needs to be a concerted effort from all shapes and opinion. Everyone in Cameroon must contribute. The women and the youth would have to work in synergy with the others also for us to build. For example, if you're talking about voters registration, for example, it has to be a concerted effort. All shades of opinion, political parties, civil society, young men, women, the elderly, they have to come together and encourage people to register. If you look at the statistics, most people who vote in this country, they're adult males of a certain age. Why is it that? How do we get the younger people and the women? How do we galvanize them so that they should get into the voters register and then run for election also? Because it's not sufficient just for them to be bystanders. How could they be active players? There's a need for mentorship also from the older generation who have seen it all, who can mentor, tutor, and guide the younger ones, who are supposed to, in reality, be the leaders. I don't want to say the leaders of tomorrow, be the leaders of today. So there is a need for this synergy, this for us coming together, so that we can build a country that would be fair for everyone, that would respect, and that each and everyone would be proud to say, I belong to this country. I think the first thing, let civil society create their civil society network that runs from all the 10 regions of the country, because you hardly see a network that is all inclusive. The few networks are networks of friends. So you see a network of 50 civil society. To be honest, just like 3 are really civil society. The rest my friends, my relatives, my cousins. How do we get civil society in all the 10 regions come out together, and do something serious? Because for advocacy, I'll give you an example. There was a time we went to Geneva for the Human Rights Council. Cameroon had, on a particular afternoon, we had like 5 side events taking place at the same time. How do you do advocacy like that? You have limited audience. How can we pool our resources together and we just do one side event? That's what I'm expecting also for us to do at the Universal Periodic Report that is coming up in November. How can we come together and just do one side event? There's lack of leadership also in civil society in Cameroon, and I think it's just reflection of the country, the number of political parties, the number of civil society. Everybody wants to be a leader, and it makes it difficult for us to come together and be the force that we are supposed to be like the checks and balance. The press is a fourth estate. I would say civil society also is a fourth estate in a society, because they should be the one that will call the government, in all the factions of the government, the opposition together when they are doing things which are anti-people. But unfortunately, it's not that way in Cameroon. And if we don't build a strong civil society and we leave it only to politicians, we would still have the same problems that we've been having over time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barrister. This has been a wonderful conversation. I saw that Mr. Asongani wanted to ask a question. I don't know if he's still online. But hello, Mr. Asongani.
Yes, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity. I'm very delighted to be part of this conversation. I'm also very delighted to have been with our learned barrister Agobala. Thank him for the wonderful work he's doing out there. It has been a very impactful conversation. But then the question I'd asked, I did mention that we're all talking about peace. Everyone is talking about peace. And at the beginning of the conversation, the barrister did mention that there's been a lot of atrocities on the ground, human rights violation on the ground. Villages are burned down, and now we're talking about peace. And I was looking for an opportunity where we'll start talking about justice, because there can never be peace without justice. In every society where there is injustice, we first of all have to make sure that those that perpetrate those the atrocities should be held responsible. Maybe I'm not also undermining the importance of peace, but I'm saying that peace and justice are intertwined, and they should be used. They should be promoted at every given moment, because we cannot, after 7 years of fighting, killing people, then we come after 7 years, we focusing on peace, and then we're not talking about justice. The perpetrators are feeling comfortable that we should be putting heat on them, telling them that they will be held responsible. So I'm here in South Africa. I'm a Cameroonian here in South Africa. I'm also a secretary of the Ambazonia movement here in South Africa. We have been doing a lot of work. We work with our community, and we've also seen the effect of the conflict on our people in South Africa. As we know, many migrants we have in our database, close to 70 Cameroonians that are in their need of documentation, assistance documentation. That these are refugees from Cameroon. They also need help. These are people that were living peacefully in Cameroon. They ran from Cameroon to South Africa. They cannot work. They don't have documentation. Police are arresting them everywhere. So
hello, Mr. Asongani.
Come again.
Can I say something?
Mr. Asongani, thank you. Just so that we are heading towards the end, thank you, so that Barrister and maybe Mr. Gabi Ambo can address your question. Yeah, Barrister, please go on.
Yeah. You see, this debate about peace and justice is a debate that has inundated the social media, their space. And justice is very important, okay? I would always fight for justice for people's rights. But the reality on the ground, when you are living on the ground, there are certain things that when there's no peace, you cannot even have justice. For example, when there is a conflict, the courts cannot hold. We've seen in places in Anglophone Cameroon, where the courts cannot hold because there is no peace. For example, they have attacked courts in Moyoka. They have burned down some of the courts. They've kidnapped some of the justices of the courts and the magistrates. So the first thing is for a peaceful and a conducive environment to be. Then the other things will fall in place. You know, look at Sierra Leone, look at the Truth and Reconciliation. There has to be a thaw. There has to be some relaxation. There is peace, and then we get into the stage. Justice is very important. But if we are saying that there must be justice for there to be peace, if you're living in the Southwest and Northwest, if you do an honest opinion poll today, most people will tell you that they want the conflict to come to an end. That will be their first priority. Then the other things, prosecuting those who have been involved in the crimes, both in the government and in the non-state armed groups. I'm happy, my brother, that you belong to one. You're from one of the groups. Also, to tell your people that we cannot achieve peace when we keep on killing our own. So yes, justice is important, but there is a need first for us to have peace, and then we work on all the other things. That would be my opinion. Like somebody who lives on the ground and somebody who's worked in the UN and in other places. There's always a need, because without peace, you know, that's when Jogmu Justice is riot. We saw that immediately there was breakdown of law and order when the conflict started. Things that we never saw in Anglophone Cameroon, kidnapping, beheading, became the order of the day. Why? Because there is no peace. When there is peace, then you can easily, you know, address the issues of injustice. We've lived in an unjust society for close to 60 years. That I totally agree with you. Okay. But I think that the priority now, I'm not saying that we should relegate peace to the background, but if there's one thing that should happen today, you know, is that we have an end of violence, cessation of violence, and then we start working on the other things. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Barrister. And I imagine that is why the Center for Human Rights, your organization, and other human rights organizations on the ground are very active in documenting human rights violations, because this is important when it comes to accountability later on. So we have, of course, CHRDA has the annual human rights report and also monthly and quarterly human rights reports that they publish every now and then, which it will be interesting for everyone who is interested to read their reports. So this is very important. And of course, it would be very important for other organizations to continue this documentation of and reporting of human rights violations, to, of course, increase how much information there is on some of these violations that happen, especially in hard-to-reach communities. So thank you very much. Thank you, Frida Ebai. Thank you, Barrister Felix Agonkongo. Thank you, Gabi Ambo. Thank you, Acheleke Christian, who has left because he has another meeting to catch up with. This has been an interesting conversation. We have put the emails in the chat box, and anyone can follow up with us later on. We are really happy to have had all of you here, and we hope that as we move forward in this advocacy and in ensuring that persons on the ground are able to have their human rights promoted and protected, we hope that there will be a cessation of conflict, and that persons can be able to get justice at the end of the day. Thank you all so much. And this has been interesting, and I hope to engage with you all next time again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Smith. Thank you, the center.
Bye-bye.
It's been an honor. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.